My name's Noah. I'm the youth director here at SunWest. I'm a drummer, and sometimes I get to play on Sundays, and so I always like to watch the drummer in the worship time. It's just a fun way for me to connect. I don't know if you guys were watching the drummer. That was Pastor Matt playing the drums. Come on. And so Matt and I were like, hey, that would be fun if we switched for a bit, and we thought, yeah, let's do it. Let's try it out. And this whole week, Matt's an amazing musician, and he hasn't played the drums for about 10 years, or around there, he told me. And so all week, he's like, Noah, can you help me out? Noah, please, can you show me a couple thing or two? I'm like, Matt, I have a sermon to prepare for, man. Dude. And then he's even he's like, oh, Noah, can you please, can you show me your signature triple fill there? And I'm like, okay, fine, Matt, here you go, all right. But I got a sermon to prepare for, so I'm just kidding. Matt's a great drummer. That was awesome. Good playing. I didn't show him anything this week. This morning, we're continuing our series on the church. This is week 3, and this morning we're discussing the expression of the flock for the church. And why are we doing a series on the church? I think it's important that we discuss what the church is, who we are, because we all enter into this room with different experiences of church, different ideas, different mindsets. We all come into this room with different ideologies about what church is. And so in week 1, Pastor Matt talked about how the church is not the building. We are the church, the people. Where we gather, the church is. It's not the building. And then in week 2, last week, Pastor Kendall talked about how an expression for the church is that we are a family. One of the points I loved that Kendall made was that you don't get to pick your family. You don't get to pick your family. You do get to pick your friends. I picked a certain friend 19 years ago, and I'm not going to single him out. He's somewhere in this room. My friend Sam has been one of my best friends for 19 years. And he has helped shape me into the man I am today. And I am so thankful for choosing a friend like Sam. He's been by my side for as long as I can remember. If ever I say a bit of a funny joke and it gets a bit of a laugh, I learned it from him, whoever he is. He's a funny guy. I'm so grateful for Sam. Sam, I love you. Thank you for being here this morning. I recommend finding a friend as funny as Sam, but you can't have him. He's taken. But we can't pick our family. We don't pick our family. We don't choose our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters. We can't pick our friends. But it's this beautiful expression of a family within this building, that we are the church and we are a family. It was a fantastic message. If you didn't get to listen to it last week, I recommend you go and watch that. So this morning, if you have your Bibles, we're going to be in John 10. If you want to flip to John 10, you can follow along on the screen. But before we do, I want to give a bit of context to John 9, because it's very important before we dive into our text today. It's very important we understand what Jesus is saying in John 10 and why he's saying it. The context is actually crucial. So in John 9, right before our passage for this morning in John 10, Jesus heals a blind man. This blind man who would have been overlooked, outcasted, who would have been considered a sinner. Jesus comes and heals him in this miraculous miracle. He gives him sight, and this blind man goes and tells people. And there's these Pharisees who were the religious leaders of the Jewish people at the time. These men who were self-indulgent, who seeked status and power and money, and they were very educated, and they probably walked around like this most of the time, looking down on people, because they liked to be seen that way. They were educated and a bit better than some of the other people in their culture. And so the Pharisees, these men, they'd been hearing about what Jesus has been doing, some of the things he'd been saying, the miraculous signs he'd been performing. And so they hear that Jesus performs a miracle and heals this blind man, and they're not very happy about it. They're not very happy about it. And to make things better, because tension has already been rising between Jesus and these Pharisees, these men, and Jesus then, to make things better, he calls them blind after he heals this blind man. He says, you guys are blind too. And so we see in John 9:39, Jesus says this to the Pharisees, these men, right after he heals the blind man. He says, I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think they see that they are blind. Some Pharisees who were standing nearby asked him, are you saying we're blind? And Jesus says, oh yeah. If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty. But you remain guilty because you claim you can see. And so we see that the context here is extremely important because Jesus makes a statement before he enters into John 10 where he's discussing this sheep and shepherding language, and he jumps immediately into it. But from John 9, the line that he says that is extremely important is he says, I entered into this world, why? To give sight to the blind. And he literally does this in a miracle. He heals this blind man. It's so crazy that he heals this man, and then he says, to prove why he's here, he does it physically, but then he's actually now addressing the Pharisees after. I've come to give sight to the blind, I've come for the blind, and I've come for the blind. These ones just don't acknowledge they're blind. This is why he's come. And so as we read John 10, we have to keep this in mind. This is crucial for us. So we're going to read John together, John 10. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. A hired hand will run when he sees a wolf coming. He will abandon the sheep because they don't belong to him, and he isn't their shepherd. And so the wolf attacks them and scatters the flock. The hired hand runs away because he's working only for money. He doesn't really care about the sheep. Jesus repeats, I am the good shepherd. I know my own sheep, and they know me. Just as the Father knows me, I know the Father, so I sacrifice my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep, too, that are not in this sheepfold. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. So why sheep and shepherding? Because when we read John 9, he heals a blind man. He says, I've come for this reason. I've come to give sight to the blind. And I've come also for the blind. They just don't acknowledge it. I've come for the blind. And then he starts talking about sheep and shepherding. When I was reading this, it didn't really make sense, the correlation. Where is the bridge? Why does he jump into sheep and shepherding language? It didn't really make sense to me. Now, I think it's actually because we don't understand sheep and shepherds as well as the people of that time might have. So for the past couple weeks, I've been studying sheep. I've been researching on sheep. Here's what I've learned. Here's some facts about sheep. Sheep are not too smart. They're a bit hard-headed. They're easily distracted, very easily distracted. They follow each other wherever. There's many funny sheep videos on YouTube where they will literally just start following each other. The rest of the flock is going ahead and one guy veers off and they all just keep veering off. And then they'll literally follow each other right off of a rock, a cliff. They just follow each other wherever they go. But they're also very personal and relational. They actually form deep lasting friendships with each other. And they can also recognize up to 50 other sheep faces. They listen only to their shepherd's voice. That's another really cool, it sounds like I only did my research on YouTube. I did other research, but one of the other videos that I was watching was on sheep responding to their shepherd's voice. I encourage you actually after the service, search it up. It's really cool. There's these videos where people will do the call, like random people will do the shepherd call, and the sheep will just keep doing what they're doing. And then the shepherd comes. He does the exact same thing, but because it's the shepherd's voice, they come. It's remarkable because the sheep are these relational animals. It's very, very cool. They rely on their flock. They have a strong herd instinct. Sheep know that they have strength in numbers. They know that they're a little bit vulnerable, weak, suspect to predators if they're isolated. Here's the coolest thing that I learned. Sheep have amazing peripheral vision. In fact, what I was reading is that they can see almost all the way back around them. Their peripheral vision is outstanding, but they have incredibly poor depth perception. And so sheep have blind spots. Sheep have massive blind spots. In fact, this is why they get spooked so easily and jumped and always scared when people come up behind them, because they have these blind spots right in front of their nose and apparently right behind their tail. Sheep are a bit blind. And we wouldn't know this right off the bat, but people at the time would have probably understood this because they know sheep, they know shepherding, they would have understood what Jesus is saying. And so this brings so much more significance. Now that we read John 9, Jesus saying, I've come for the blind. I've come to give sight to the blind. And I've also come for those who think they see, but they're also actually blind. Then he gets into sheep and shepherding. Sheep have blind spots. Sheep are not meant to lead themselves. Sheep need a shepherd. They're not like other animals who can lead themselves and they'll be okay. Sheep rely on the flock. They are dependent on a shepherd. They will not survive without a shepherd. They're fully dependent on a shepherd. And Jesus in John 10 is saying, I'm the good shepherd and I've come for my sheep. I've come to give sight to the blind. And I believe Jesus is actually revealing a deep truth here about humanity in John 10 that we may not initially see because we didn't understand sheep so well. But now that we understand, sheep have blind spots. And a little fun fact, do you know what the most referenced animal is in the Bible? Sheep, yes, good. Sheep. In the entire Bible, the most referenced animal is sheep. They're often used as sacrifices for the people in the Old Testament when they have sinned and they sacrifice a sheep, but they're mainly used to describe us. Sheep are most often used to describe us, humans. Jesus says, I've come to give sight to the blind. I've come to gather sheep, and I am the shepherd. Jesus is revealing a truth about humanity in saying sheep, in the same way sheep are not meant to lead themselves. He's saying to the Pharisees and the surrounding people, you also are not meant to lead yourselves. You sheep, you need a shepherd. We are dependent on a shepherd. We need guidance. Humans, we were not meant to try to be self-sufficient. We were not designed in a way where we can operate on a sufficiency that is only reliant on us. C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity, he quotes, man trying to be their own masters invents some sort of happiness themselves outside God and apart from God. And out of that hopeless attempt comes nearly all that we call human history. I think there's a cultural narrative that has just been heightened and increased as we've continually lived in this digital world, where it's the truth to just follow your own truth. Lead yourselves, do you. Guide your own life. And I think there's something appealing or almost attractive to us as humans about that, to be the master of your fate, the captain of your soul. There's something cool with that. I'm doing this on my own. I'm leading myself. I'm getting my own. We were not meant to lead ourselves. Jesus is saying, to the crowds, to the Pharisees, I've come to give sight to the blind. I've come for the sheep. In Matthew 6, Jesus is again looking out at a crowd before he does the miracle of feeding the 5,000. And it says, Jesus had compassion on the crowd because they were like sheep without a shepherd. You can go through the scriptures in the Bible. There is countless ones describing how we are sheep in need of a shepherd. The Pharisees, these men, they believed that they were self-sufficient. They believed that they saw clearly. Are you calling us blind? Jesus says, yeah. Are you calling us blind? No. We do good works. We know the way to God. We're better than all these other people. We're not sheep. We're shepherds. We lead the people of Israel, the Pharisees say. No, look how good I am. I have all these good things to show for. I'm educated. I know the laws of the Bible. I follow them religiously. I'm self-sufficient. I know the way to God. I know the keys to heaven. But when Jesus says, hey, I've come for sheep, they say, no, not us. Maybe them, but not us. They thought they saw clearly. They thought they were leading others clearly. But like sheep, as the Pharisees are, they're in need of guidance, of a shepherd. I believe in John 10, Jesus is revealing that the most dangerous blindness is thinking that we don't need a shepherd. This is what culture and society will tell you. Do it on your own. You can make it on your own. Maybe the things in life can satisfy. Friends, let me tell you this. There is a deep, deep longing inside every human that can only be satisfied by one thing. You can look across history, as C.S. Lewis quotes. You can look at men from history who have pursued money, power, pleasure, who have pursued people. And those things will not satisfy the deep, deep longing for a love that is not of this world. There is a deep need within each of us. A need, a longing to belong, to be seen, to be loved. That love cannot be filled by things of this world. We were made for something otherworldly. That's why the longing is in there. That's why our human nature longs to fill it with other things. Within our human nature, our tendency is to just lead ourselves. Sometimes it feels like there's hope in that. The Pharisees are saying, no, we're good. And Jesus will say, no, you're sheep. I've come for the blind. I'm the shepherd. I'm here to guide you and to lead you, to care for you, to protect you. The truth of the matter is we all follow something. Whether we've decided consciously that we're going to follow that something or that person, or unconsciously or subconsciously. Subconsciously, whether we've decided it or consciously we've decided it, we all follow something. We're all shaped and formed by things of this world. We're formed by our family members. We're formed by our friends. We are influenced by influencers. We follow trends. We follow each other. We're a bit like sheep. We all follow something, and we are in need of a shepherd. This is the truth that Jesus is revealing by his statement right before John 10, why he goes to this sheep and shepherding language. Now, David was a great man in the Bible. King David, who walked the earth years before Jesus, he was the king of Israel. This great man. David would have achieved almost everything that men at that time would have desired. David was a giant slayer. David was a great warrior. He won countless battles against armies. David conquered nations. He was a poet. He was the king of Israel. And do you know what David writes that potentially scholars would agree at the time period of during his reign of Israel? One of his most famous Psalms, he writes, Psalm 23. David writes, "The Lord is my shepherd." The Lord is my shepherd. Let me translate that, or you don't need it translated, but let me just say it another way. The Lord is my shepherd. David's saying, Lord, you are my shepherd, and I am a sheep. The Lord is my shepherd, and I am a sheep. That's not in there, but this is what he's saying. The Lord is my shepherd. In that statement, he is acknowledging what he is, a sheep. Get this, the Bible is so cool. David grew up a shepherd boy. For David's lifetime, before he became king, do you know where he was? Out in the fields, tending to his sheep, to his flock. David would have known exactly what it meant to be a shepherd. He would have understood the characteristics of sheep better than any of us. David spent years in his adolescent years growing up before he was king in the field by himself, tending to his flock. David would have known better than any of us what it meant to be a sheep and to have a shepherd. And this great man, King David, who achieved all that men at that time could have wanted, he writes that the Lord is my shepherd, acknowledging his need, acknowledging his dependency, acknowledging that there is a lack in his life. But he knows that when the Lord is his shepherd, there is no lack. That deep, deep longing to be seen and to be loved and to belong, to be loved, he knows that that can only be satisfied by the God of the universe who created him, who wants to protect him and guide him. David knows that he lacks nothing with the Lord as his shepherd, as he is a sheep. David knows that with the Lord as his shepherd, God's staff, as it is in this image, would guide him back into the flock as he wanders. David knows that with the Lord as his shepherd, the Father's rod in this image would protect the predators away from the flock. Your rod and your staff, they protect me. This is what David writes a few sentences later. David knows that there is guidance, there's protection, there is care, there is love, there is belonging in this flock as he acknowledges that he is a sheep and the Lord is his shepherd. So we have the Pharisees and we have David, these great men of their time. So what's the difference between them then? Because Jesus is saying, I've come for my sheep. I've come to gather my flock. I am the shepherd. I am here. But what's the difference between David and the Pharisees? What's the difference between their response? I believe it's the difference between humility and pride. I believe it's the difference between humility and pride. One with a response of humility, of acknowledging their lack, of acknowledging their blind spots, of acknowledging their weakness, of acknowledging their need. Someone who has reached the heights of human achievements, yet knowing that there is still something that is unfulfilled. The Lord is my shepherd, David says. I am a sheep. A posture of humility. Because that's hard. I don't know if you heard me when I read the facts about sheep. It's not the greatest thing to acknowledge that we're sheep. In fact, it's a bit, it kind of hurts a bit. It requires a posture of humility. The Pharisees, these men, would have been filled with this pride, thinking, we're not sheep, we're shepherds. We lead others, we don't need leading. We're sufficient, we're fine. And in fact, the irony of it all was that they were these men who people would have looked at that were sought after God and that were the closest to God. But in fact, they were potentially the farthest from God. Why? Because their pride was what distanced them. God is opposed to pride. Why? Because when we are prideful, when we believe that we can be sufficient on our own, what happens is God is over here and he wants to invite us into his flock. He wants to care and protect and guide us. But as we believe that we can be sufficient on our own, what happens is that pride, it starts to push us away, because those two things, self-sufficiency and dependency on God, they don't correlate. That's why in 1 Peter 5, we read that God opposes the proud. And Jesus here is coming to the Pharisees saying, Pharisees, you're in need. But their pride is what blinded them. One of the really cool things about this whole moment in John 10 is Jesus is actually directly referencing Ezekiel 34. And in Ezekiel 34, which is in the Old Testament, the prophet Ezekiel, at the time, he's writing about the state Israel's in, and he writes about sheep and shepherds. And he writes and he talks about how the current leaders of the people of Israel, the nation of Israel at the time, the leaders at the time of Israel were these false shepherds. This is the language that we read. They were these false shepherds. That they were just in it for themselves. They were just doing it for them. They were not leading the people of Israel to good things. They were leading to a path of destruction, these false shepherds. And then prophet Ezekiel hears from God and writes this, that the Lord says, I myself will come to gather my sheep. And so what's super cool is that Jesus is referencing this, and the Pharisees also would have keyed in on this because this is a direct correlation to what he's saying. And so they would have also understood an unmistakably direct statement that Jesus is saying, I am the good shepherd, and I've come for my sheep. And they would have keyed in directly that this is a reference to Ezekiel. And they know that God is going to come one day as a shepherd to gather his sheep and his flock. And so this means that Jesus is also making a statement here that we cannot miss. He is saying that I am God here in flesh before you, and I'm here to gather my sheep. He is making an unmistakable statement. One that also would have increased the uproar of the Pharisees, because he is telling them by referencing this passage, I'm God. I'm the God of the universe, and I am here in form of flesh to gather my sheep. I am the shepherd. Now for you and I, this is beautiful. That the God of the universe cares so much about you and me. The God of the universe is such a personal, relational God that he cares enough about us to actually seek us out and bring us into his flock as we are sheep in need of a shepherd. The God of the universe would do that for you and I. This is what Jesus is saying. I'm God and I'm here to gather my sheep. It's beautiful that the God of the universe cares that much about you and I. That he has a purpose and plan for you and I, that he would come and seek out you and I, even if it meant he had to leave the 99 for the one. He would come for you and for me because he cares that much about his sheep. That's the love he has for us. Jesus says, I have other sheep too that are not in this sheepfold. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice. And there will be one flock and one shepherd. Because he's saying the God of the universe is I. I'm here to gather my sheep. I'm here to bring my flock together. Jesus, the good shepherd, came to gather all of us. He did not just come for some people. He did not just come for one or two. He did not just come for those who behave well or those who go to church every Sunday. He did not come for just a certain couple. He came for all people because he says, I have other sheep too that I must bring. Speaking to the disciples, meaning there's other people that aren't here right now, other people that are not Jewish people that I must gather as well. There will be one flock united under one shepherd. Jesus is saying, I'm here to gather all people. I'm here to bring the needy to me, the desperate, the broken, the dirty, the failures. I'm here to gather the CEOs, the pastors, the families, the husbands, the wives, the children, the athletes, the influencers. I'm here for all people, the Christians and the non-Christians. I'm here to gather all people because there shall be one flock. And what unites that flock, the church, what unites us in this sense as we are sheep under the shepherd, it's that. We're united by the fact that we have a need of the shepherd. The one flock. This is what unites us. That we are in need of a shepherd. That we were not made to lead ourselves. The God of the universe desires a personal relationship with you because he created you, he made you, he loves me. And he desires that we be one flock. How do we enter into this flock? How do we remain? Could it be as simple as just acknowledging our need? Could the gospel be that simple? Could the good news of Jesus be that simple? Maybe not. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. The gospel's complex, but it's also simple. Could it be so simple that the thing that unites us is our need for the shepherd? Could it be so simple that to enter into the flock of Jesus, the shepherd who desires to guide and care and lead us, could it be so simple that to be a part of the flock, the one thing is just to acknowledge our need? So we aren't left with a 3-step plan in John 10 and how to live out as sheep. We're not given this, unfortunately. So now what for you and I? We're not given a simple A, B, and C, a simple plan. Okay, now you go and live out this way. We don't have that. So now what? What are we left with? I believe we're left with an invitation. I believe we're left with an invitation to be a part of the flock by simply recognizing that we are sheep. By simply recognizing we are sheep in need of a shepherd. By going against the narrative of culture that we can operate on our own, that we can lead ourselves, that we can do this life on our own, follow your truth. I believe that the thing that unites us, the truth that Jesus is saying, is that we are in need of a shepherd. You all follow something, Jesus says. We all follow something. He says there's a need for all people of a shepherd. And he says, it is I. I am that shepherd. I'm here for my flock. Would you stand with me as we close? I believe that the gospel could be this simple. That we're invited, and this is what I believe that John 10 is, what remains is an invitation for us. I believe that we have an invitation to be a part of the flock of God. I believe that there's an invitation for every one of us, for all people of the earth, to be encountered by the love of God. I'm emotional because I've been changed by the love of God. Ooh, this wasn't part of the plan. My life has been changed. I'm a new person. I was once astray, a wanderer. But the love of the shepherd who sought me out changed my life. The good shepherd. Friends, there's one more thing I want to say. Oof, boy. There's one more thing that I want to say that I have to get across before we end today. That is what the love of the shepherd truly is. I'm emotional because it's changed my life. The love of the shepherd is backwards. It doesn't make sense. It's a radical love that should not be. Because there's no instance or scenario where a sheep should be the one that lives and the shepherd is the one that dies. The shepherd, man, has infinite more value than the sheep. The human shepherd has so much more worth than this sheep. It should be the sheep that dies for the shepherd. It's backwards. That's the radicalness of the gospel. That's the radical news of Jesus, that he says, I am the good shepherd who has come for my flock, and I sacrifice my life for the flock. Jesus gives his life for you and I, because that's how much he cares for us. That's how much he loves us. That's how much he wants us to be a part of this one flock. As we acknowledge our need and recognize, Lord, you are my shepherd. I am just a sheep. It's that unites us. It's that can change our lives. It's that is the good news. That he would be so willing, so loving to sacrifice his life for you and for me. It doesn't make sense that a shepherd is the one that should be dying for the sheep. That's not how it should be. But for a good shepherd, that is. For a good shepherd, not a false shepherd, like the Pharisees thought they were. These hired hands just doing it for themselves. No. A good shepherd protects his flock. A good shepherd goes and sacrifices his life for the sheep because he cares about them so much, he's not going to let anything get to his flock. He'd leave the 99 for one. But it's not just individual. He's come for all people. He's come for all of us sheep, all of humanity. He wants to be a part of his flock. We're going to have prayer teams at the front. And I believe the invitation this morning is to be a part of the flock. If you have prayer requests, if you felt the Lord calling you to be a part of the flock this morning, we have prayer teams at the front. I invite you to come and to pray, to recognize our need. If you've made that decision and recognize your need, maybe this morning is a time where we come before the Lord and we just say, Lord, I recognize my need once again. I've been operating on my own. I've been wandering from the flock. Lord, welcome me back. Because he's always so welcoming. The belonging of this flock is always available. So this morning, this is our invitation. We have prayer teams at the front as we close. I'm going to pray. Would you bow your heads with me? God of the universe, we thank you for being present here this morning. Thank you for the church, this family. Thank you that we do not operate as isolated sheep, that we are part of a flock who cares for one another. Thank you, Lord, that you are our shepherd, that you guide us, that you lead us, that you care for us, that you love us. As we are sheep in need of a shepherd, as we are blind in need of sight. Thank you that this is what unites us, Lord, that we are sheep under one shepherd. Thank you, Jesus.